Thanks for joining us, Kurt. It's awesome to see you in person instead of just talking to you on the phone.
Over the phone? Yeah.
So you've been writing for Distiller Magazine for a long time, but you do more than just write, right? You run a whiskey club in New York. You do tastings. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background in spirits and how you got here.
Sure. I mean, the easiest way to tell you how I got here, it's because me and beer don't get along. It's something about beer. I think I had some kind of gluten allergy. So when I was in
Oh,
college, I drank beer and I'd bloat and felt like I was pregnant. And I'm like, no. And then a friend of mine from Hong Kong was into whiskey. She would drink with like Australian ruggers. So I hung out with her and got into
uh-huh.
Jameson at like 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to drink something. I was drinking that. So I moved to DC after school, made friends with Rich Thomas, who currently runs the Whiskey Reviewer, and we would drink bourbon because he was from Lexington. I learned a lot about bourbon from him, and we would go and like talk politics and watch boxing in bars in DC and hang out
Wow.
just, BSing. So when he left to go to Portugal, he decided he wanted to do a whiskey web magazine and he needs somebody who was in the States. And because I live in New York, and he's like, you can write, so here, I need you to help me do this. So I think I was employee number one or unpaid employee number one,
And when
whatever.
was this approximately?
I would say it was probably around 2012, but it might have been earlier. It might have been as early as 2009, which is
Yeah.
scary to think of.
I'm,
So I
I'm
started
with you.
doing reviews, and the first time you do reviews, and you know how this goes, you start talking to the old timers and you're like, I don't know anything. And I feel like an idiot. So I
Mhm.
acquired all these books and read all this stuff. My background in college is history and my day job's a paralegal. So I'm a decent researcher. So I started like reading and trying to get together questions that would, I didn't want that when I met them at these events that they were like, oh my God, this guy's going to ask me one more stupid question. I wanted to kind of get the stupid questions out of the way and ask them something that either they would find interesting or that I could engage them on. That wasn't the normal. So the entire time, it's like I've been building up my knowledge. I've been going to events here in New York. New York is a great place because all the brands eventually end up here at some point.
Mhm.
So lots of events to go to. There are other writers you can talk to and learn
Mhm.
from. So yeah, that's how I strangely got here. But then within that, because I wanted to find a way to get rid of the whiskey in my house and I had an opportunity to do so, I met these people at an Ardbeg event and the conversation that started the club was as simple as, um, I'm like, I want to start a whiskey club. And they're like, oh, we have a conference room you could use. And that literally started the club because they were whiskey fans. So like, oh, you can
Amazing.
bring whiskey to us? Great. There you go. That was it. And I've been
Totally.
using that space. I found an email from January 2015. And it was I guess the follow up to our first tasting. Our first tasting with David Laird,
Mm.
who was with Balvenie. And it was kind of just like, hey, I heard you guys had a really good time. Glad you guys enjoyed. We'll do this again. I'll get you another email in February. I was just cleaning my inbox and found that original email. And
So
that
that's like
was the
10
one.
plus years.
Yeah. I've been running
Yeah.
the club for that long, and then I do private tastings. And because people would chase after me for it. People would ask me, like, hey,
Totally.
could you do a tasting? And I mean, they will pay me, and money's not the worst thing in the world. So I'm like, okay, fine, I can do
Yeah.
private tastings. So I do
Yeah.
that too. Yeah.
Awesome. So how often does your whiskey club meet? Is it like once a month, once a quarter? Like, how's that
The
work?
trick is, okay, so when I sign up a member, I tell them that I promise them a minimum of once a month. Now, the once a month, what might happen is we might miss a month. I may get busy and I can't do it, but invariably there'll be months where I do three.
Mhm.
So, for example, Sukhinder Singh reached out because they're doing something with their brands, and he calls me and he's like, "Oh yeah, my new importers said I should reach out to you." Well, actually, they said I should do something with the Manhattan Whiskey Club. And he's like, oh, that's Kurt. Okay, let me call Kurt. So, I'm like, okay, I'm throwing in another tasting. Like I had two planned for March. I'll squeeze Sikander. And if I can make it happen, and it's more, to be honest, it's more about the club than me. Like if I have the opportunity to do four tastings because cool people are coming to town and there's a cool event, I'll make it happen.
Mhm.
I could hang out with Sikander on my own. I could hang out with him in London, but it's like, no. My members have never met him. They've heard about him. He's an interesting character in the whiskey industry. So yeah, if
Mhm.
Sikander's going to physically be here and do stuff, then yes, I will make that happen and get them to let them.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that because 'cause you've basically been in that sort of interstitial space between brands and consumers
Hmm?
for a long, for more than a decade, for 15 years or something, both as a
Right.
writer and running the club and facilitating or hosting tastings. So, which is why it was so interesting to me when you worked on this story, the latest story that you did for Distiller, which is kind of focused on like what whiskey consumers want now. And I say want now because you've been kind of privy to what whiskey consumers have been interested in for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think that anyone who's sort of been in the whiskey business for as long as you have, or even I have, like we've sensed there's a shift happening, right? There's a big
Right.
shift. And you're kind of, I think, at even the beyond just looking at economic statistics, you're at the leading edge of that, right? Like you're like interacting with people all the time, like a bartender, sort of, where you're
Right.
like, getting real time feedback from people who are self selected, interested in whiskey, but maybe new to whiskey, or maybe, you know, not as experienced as you are. So your story, which is so good, there's so much that's interesting about this story. But one of the things that you talked about was that you think that we're not fully appreciating the impact that COVID has really had on whiskey consumers, both in terms of like people who went into COVID already loving whiskey, being into whiskey, and then people who maybe got into whiskey after COVID. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was one of the most interesting parts of your story.
Sure. I mean, the thing is that you have to take off your whiskey fan hat and get to like the normal consumer. So, like for us, we buy whiskey, we get sent whiskey, our friends give us whiskey. Having hundreds of bottles of booze in our house is no big thing. It's what we deal with if you want to be in this because you want to taste new releases. You want to buy stuff to like, oh, I heard this was great from years ago. You'll go on auctions. Like every aspect of the industry, you're going to dabble in on some level because it's part of what you do because you write. For your average person, having 5 bottles is problematic. They feel guilty with 5 open bottles in their house, 10. COVID changed that, but it wasn't a permanent change. They were doing stuff at home because they were deprived of bars. So they bought more stuff because friends are coming by. They maybe had a bigger variety because, again, friends are coming by. You can't drink the same bottle. It's one thing like in the 70s, because, oh, before I forget, I didn't mention the podcast. I have a
Oh yeah.
podcast now, so I get
Yeah.
to talk about that too. But in doing the research on that, and you think back to like our parents or family, they had a set of bottles that were in the house. You could almost like run through it like, okay, there was Seagram's, there's probably a Canadian Club, there's going to be like maybe a Johnny Red or a Johnny Black, a Dewar's, a Chivas. There's just certain things that are there, and that's your staple. And you only bought new stuff when something ran out or you got a gift. Like that was what you were generally drinking if you were your average person. And average people make up the bulk of the market. That's your whiskey public. Let's put it this way. Brands would go broke trying to cater what I want. You know what I mean? It's just not a sustainable business.
Mhm.
So I think what tricked them was they're looking at the numbers throughout COVID, and they thought that this was kind of some kind of, if not a permanent change, a longer term shift in buying. But the reality was people were reacting to the circumstance that were there. So once the circumstances change, I can go back to my bar. I'm not hosting people at my house on a weekly basis because that, you were doing your personal circle of friends for at least the first year or so of COVID. You weren't hanging out with everybody. You were just like, this is my only social outlet other than family. I have my 5 trusted friends come by or some family
Mhm.
members come by and we have drinks. Once that changed, there was no need for your average person to double, triple, quadruple the amount of whiskey or spirit they had in their house. And also on top of that, everybody's expenses changed
Mhm.
because you had COVID, there was more money to be spent. You were spending
Mhm.
less money on like travel or clothes. So there was like your budget had shifted. But then, when COVID was over or handled, it all slapped back with a vengeance. All of a sudden, you had the tariff issue, you had increased cost, you had inflation. So on top of the fact that the stuff you were buying was now more expensive, other things you were buying were more expensive. And I think it's something that whiskey fans and occasionally the business forgets. Whiskey, for the most part, is a luxury item. extra item. It's
Mhm.
discretionary. So discretionary expenditures will shift with the economy. And so if you're
Mhm.
feeling tight, you're going to buy less whiskey. If you're feeling tight, you're not going to buy the most premier release from a brand you like. If you love Four Roses, maybe you're not going to go get that more expensive barrel pick. You're going to stick to the standard because, yeah, I want to get another bottle because my other bottle's dead, but I'm not going to overextend myself and spend too much because now
Mhm.
you're going to be a lot more cost conscious than you were a year or two ago. And I think, and some of it I think comes from like doing tastings, not with my club. Like I talk to them on a regular basis, but like another writer teased me slash gave me grief. It's like, you can't use them as an example because they've been with you for so long.
Mhm.
I don't use them as my primary. Like I do talk to them and I see what they buy and we discuss it, but it's really the people who have me do paid tastings because then I
Totally.
can see like what's their budget tolerance.
Yeah.
If I'm pouring stuff, because they'll give me a set budget to get whiskey, they're gonna ask, hey, how much is that bottle? Where did you get it? And
Mhm.
you can see their faces when it's like they feel that that's too much. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not gonna get that bottle, or maybe a special occasion. You get a bottle at a certain price point, they're like, oh, cool. They're literally on their phones trying to track down where they can get it. I've had tastings where people are ordering the stuff while the tasting is going on so that it gets delivered to them if they're in a place where that happens.
Yeah.
So it gets delivered to them during the week. They're like, hey, I bought 2 bottles of that. I really liked it. That's,
Mhm.
and it's useful. It's a weird place. You're right, because it's like, I don't work for a brand. So I have no, interest in dealing with that stuff. It's just like, love the brands, but I look at it more from a historical point of view. But I'm not
Mhm.
wedded to like, oh, I love this brand. I'm going to support them with everything I say. I'm like, no, this is the reality of the situation. It might be your prices are too high. It might be
Mhm.
you're too many SKUs and you're confusing the customer, and the customer doesn't know what the hell it is you're doing, and they just want something simple. And you see it with certain brands that right now they're changing their packaging. They're
Mhm.
making it more simple, more straightforward. Let's get down to like a core release or core releases because the fans will go get those. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I mean, so price consciousness, right? That's like
Mhm.
a big you also mentioned that in the context of like younger consumers, right? I know there's like a lot of hand wringing about Gen Z in the drinks industry in general that you're finding that young people are actually interested in
Yeah.
whiskey. They're price conscious. And you said something that was interesting to me, which is that they're maybe not that impressed by being told something is great or like a
Right.
heritage brand or like, these sorts of, I don't know, there are these things in the whiskey world where you're like, oh, this is a very special whiskey, because
Right.
former generations said so. And that's not necessarily enough for a younger consumer to get interested right now.
Because it all comes down to money. It's like, it's how I would say that a lot of younger consumers are like, let's say, economically insecure. They have things they have to pay for. They have to pay for rent. They maybe need to buy new clothes or get a car,
Mhm.
money for medical things or whatever. And again, whiskey or spirits are discretionary. So if the issue is I want to have a drink, there are lots of cheaper options. And so the flashy bottle doesn't matter. The flashy, packaging doesn't matter. I've seen crazy packaging and I'm tasting the whiskey and it's not, and it's funny. I get it from, and I'm sure you get it too, you're writing, you get it, you taste all these different whiskeys, all these different spirits. And there's times I'm looking at the packaging and I'm like, half or 2/3 of the cost of this bottle is that package. It's not the whiskey. I
Yeah.
go, I'd be happier if you put that thing in a simple bottle and simple packaging and charge me less money.
Yeah.
Because if the
It's like
whole
on the
idea is me
bottle.
buying the whiskey, just give me the damn whiskey and let it
Yeah.
go. You know what I mean?
You pick it up and you're like, "Oh, this is a must be a full bottle," but it's an empty bottle. It just feels full because it weighs a crazy amount.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. It's the brands on some level, the ones that engage in whiskey this way, they feel, we're a luxury item. And it's like, you want a luxury presentation. You're buying an expensive watch, you're not going to want it wrapped in brown paper. And I understand that. But like the bulk of the market isn't there. And
Mhm,
so you need to be where the bulk of the market is. So, for
mhm.
example, we can take some real time events. I was talking to a friend about the acquisition of Four Roses by Gallo. And I'm kind of curious how it plays out because I was like, well, will Gallo leave them alone or will they push, let's say what Gallo does on Four Roses? we're thinking the best scenario is that, let's say they focus Four Roses on the best of their mid and lower price range and just get it out there more, get more people buying it. That's fine. It's like
Mhm.
Four Roses is a great bourbon and it's not overpriced. So if you
Mhm.
stick to like, there's stuff that's, let's say, sub 100, stick to stuff that's like 40 and 60. I think 40 and 60, I think is about right because
Mhm.
that's kind of like in bars here are expensive. $40 is, potentially two drinks,
Mhm.
but for an average person,
Here
it's like,
too. Yeah.
yeah, a bottle, if you can get a bottle of something you like drinking for sub 60 or sub $70, you're like, cool, I'll have that in my house. I can have multiple drinks. I can share it with friends. And
Mhm.
that's like the kind of thing where it won't kill you. It won't kill your paycheck to buy that one bottle every other paycheck or whatever, whatever ratio suits you.
Mhm.
So that might work really well for Gallo versus, so we don't see Gallo doing the luxury play and like, oh, let's get more expensive bottles. Let's do more expensive packaging. No, they'll probably be, all right, here's the part of the market we want to be in. And that's the kind of market where the younger people are in. Because,
Mhm.
along with these, whether I've done a charity tasting or I've had a decent amount of experience people, and it's funny because I feel like I'm old, but they're like in their 20s. And we talk about these things and like they can appreciate things that taste really good, but I'm giving them things they've never had
Mhm.
but at a price point they like. And they're like, oh, where is this? Can I get this here? Where's it from? They don't care that it's not a name brand. So if I'm giving them American single malt, if I give them an American single malt that tastes good or a Japanese whiskey that tastes good, their first question is, what's the price and where
Mhm.
can I get it?
Mhm.
And none of that stuff has any legacy to them. It's simply the fact that for them, they're just doing the math in their head. The price point and the taste is attractive to them that they'd be happy to drink it at home or share it with friends. And
Mhm.
that's the win. It's
Yeah.
less when you have the expensive bottles, it's more like you get that stuff to show off. And
Yeah.
that's like that's expensive watch, expensive car. It's more display than utility. This
Totally.
is a utility purchase. This is like I like this whiskey, I'm willing to drink it, and it's a price point I'm happy to spend.
Yeah. Yeah, the whiskey industry, every now and then reminds me a little bit of, like, California wine, where it's like, you can sustain an industry for a good amount of time on older consumers, wealthy
Mhm,
consumers, but if you never make outreach to younger consumers, eventually the shit kind of hits the fan there, and
mhm.
so it does worry me sometimes about the whiskey industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned it in the article, like I'm interested in guitars. Part of it's a history thing, but part of it's an actual economic issue. Is that you use a brand like Fender. Some people, even in the industry, say like Fender makes too many SKUs. They do that to have something at every price point. So
Mhm.
basically, it's like you want to spend $200 to get a guitar, we have a guitar for you. You want to spend $5,000 or $7,000, we have those guitars too. It's like somewhere
Yeah,
between
and
200 bucks,
yeah.
yeah, and $10,000.
Uh-huh.
We have something at like, basically at $200 increments all the way up. So wherever you want to come into the market, we're there for you.
Yeah.
And I think for whiskey, that doesn't always happen.
Mhm.
There's times where because the luxury consumer theoretically is more attractive. They have more money. You're getting more bang for the buck, but there's less of them. It's like you're probably happier with the person who is buying a bottle of, Wild Turkey 101 on a regular basis because at least you
Mhm.
know what they're going to buy one once a month. You know what I mean? They're
Mhm.
like that's 12 bottle sales. And
Yeah.
it's not as sexy as the exclusive stuff, but they're not going to buy that thing every month. They're just not. They
Mhm.
might buy it once a year if you're lucky.
Yeah.
They'll save that thing for years, so to speak, if they can.
And I think there was like, people talk about like that the sort of like destocking that had to happen in retail after the pandemic, right? When like there was all of this kind of inventory in the system that folks needed to sell through. And
Hmm.
as purchasing dropped off, it just took longer to sell through that inventory. I think there's kind of like a little bit of a mirror thing happening with whiskey consumers and like high-end whiskey consumers who maybe did like a lot of shopping during COVID
Hmm.
and still have all that whiskey. They haven't opened it all even. So it's
Right.
like their purchasing is slowed down because there are many people who just have like many lifetimes worth of whiskey already, they're done.
And that plays out even with your average consumer, because
Mhm.
for them, I'm sure there's some of them that still have bottles that they bought during COVID. They were buying
Yeah.
handles 175 bottles of like the standard
Yeah.
Weller or
Yeah.
Four Roses or
Yeah.
Buffalo Trace. And they had that for when they're having parties or like, hey, we're having a mixer. We're doing like cocktails or like summer barbecue. We're going to do a quick punch or something. Yeah. They probably bought, if they could, they bought a case of that stuff cheap and is sitting in the basement gathering dust because they're not drinking it fast enough.
Mhm.
And we know this. It's like, I don't drink every day, never have, because there'd be a problem if I did. So the amount of consumption you have in your house when you're having multiple friends over all the time and you're always in your house is entirely different than when you're living a normal life where,
Mm.
you go to work 5 days a week, you hang out with your family and do other stuff. It's like, you're not just killing that stuff. You're not a bar. Bars do that.
Yeah.
But and people on some level were their own bar for
Yeah.
2 years and they bought
100%.
accordingly. But
Yeah.
now they're not. And now they can go to a bar and like I don't know if it's cheaper necessarily, but you go to a place, you'll watch a game, you'll talk with your friends, you'll buy a couple drinks or buy some beer and you'll go home. And I don't need the bottle in my house. And that bottle in my house is sitting there. And they don't know how to get rid of it. So it's just there. And it won't change until that stuff goes away. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that might take another 2 years, in all honesty.
Have you, while doing tastings recently, has a consumer said or done anything in response to a whiskey that surprised you, or that you were like, "Huh, that's a sea change."
Well, generally, it's been their reactions to flavor
Hmm.
and kind of getting them to cross over either way. Like, I find that you have, like, for lack of a better word, entrenched interests within certain, like, a lot of Americans, they generally will drink bourbon or they'll drink Irish. So, not to say that the Americans don't drink Scotch, they do.
Yeah.
But, like, your average person, it's like the thing is that some people, they get introduced to Scotch and it's a smokier Scotch, and they make the assumption that all Scotch is smoky. So, like, they get, like somebody gives them Ardbeg or Lagavulin or something,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't
Yeah.
like Scotch." I'm like, "It's not that you don't like Scotch. You don't like smoky Scotch. So let's get
Mhm.
you something else, and see if you like it." I had a member of the club where she's like, "I don't like smoky whiskeys." I'm like, "You like Ardbeg, you like actually, um, Highland Park and Springbank." I go, "Both of those have some peat. It's the type of peat they're using. That's the
Mhm.
issue." Because it's like, if you get the heathery peat versus the iodine peat.
Mhm.
So what I've been surprised about is because the one interesting thing that we have happening now is a lot of these new releases, there's different finishes or different flavors, especially with like American single malt, but also even some of the bourbons of some of the Angels Envies have had just different finishes than they've been doing. People have been really receptive to that. And that
Mm.
kind of tells
Mhm.
me that, like, oh, you can break them out of the cage of, well, I expected to taste this way. They're willing to
Yeah.
drink other stuff. They
Yeah.
may not be willing to spend if it's uber crazy, but if it's at a reasonable price point, they are willing to try it and taste it. And
Yeah.
like, oh, I like this. Actually, I would get this. And they're
Mhm.
cool with it, let's say, subverting their expectations, which is a good thing. That's good for the industry.
Yeah.
Because I think over all this time, everybody's had different stuff. So, it's more common that you've had people put up their hands at an event. Have you had Japanese? Have you had Indian whiskey? Have you had American single malt? I have more people. It's not a lot of them, but there's more people who have had more different types of whiskey, which is good, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of part of the bigger picture happening in beverage alcohol overall, right? Where like they talk about consumers becoming promiscuous, right?
Right.
Where they're like, I might drink wine one day, and then a couple days later I go out for beers, and then I have cocktails over the weekend. And they're not like, maybe in our parents' or grandparents' generation where they were like, I am a Chivas drinker and
Yep.
I'll never touch another whiskey, where people are just way more open to cross category exploration and the blending of categories in weird ways, and just have a more open-minded approach to what they're
Yeah, and
drinking.
it's good for whiskey in general. It's only dangerous for the brands if the brands get complacent. Like,
Mhm.
i.e., like, I tell people when I do the podcast that, we make Diageo out. We don't make Diageo out to be a villain. It's just that, I say Diageo is kind of closer to an anti-hero. Diageo does what it does. And
Yeah.
whatever it does affects or shift the industry one way because they're so big, they cannot move
Mhm.
affecting everything else. And the thing is, I say, like, here's an example. I go, when they do their special releases, here's the trick. They do not change their core releases. So it's fine to do it as an experiment. It's fine to say, hey, let's do something new. You want to keep your core, ranges, or at least some part of that okay. So
Mhm.
like, hey, if I want to do a new Oban, yeah, great. I can add another Oban, but the old one's there. If you like that one, you want to drink that one, great. If you want to try this one, that one's there for you too. It's kind of
Mhm.
along the lines of the Fender and everything at every price point. It's like, oh, you want to explore, we're here for you. But, if you have things you like and you love, we're not taking them away. Cause that's
Mhm.
always, consumers get mad about that. They like take it
Yeah.
personal. If you take away brands that they actively love, like
Mhm.
core parts of the range, there's times, you might not survive the backlash because they just won't drink you. They're like, no. Like I'm mad at them. They did that. I'm going to find somebody else and make an adjustment to another brand. So
Mhm.
you kind of have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. For smaller brands, I mean, in that landscape, is there anything that you think folks can do to kind of respond to this moment, or like brands that you think are doing a particularly good job responding to this moment? Like, what does this mean if you own a small craft spirits brand? What do you recommend?
For me, I think I said it in a piece, and it's funny how with AI, it's come back as far as like for writers. Like, so for what we do, we're living in a world where, and it's funny, I had this ad, not an ad, and an article from Malt Advocate before it became Whiskey Advocate, and somebody was kind of tongue in cheek and he was complaining about whiskey bloggers. And he's like, I like to get paid to write. And all these people who are fans and writing about whiskey online, it's like, I don't know why they don't want to get paid. And like, they're taking money out of my pocket. Well, we have that situation now, which is different. Even for us, however we make our money or write or whatever, AI will kick out certain things, will write for us, and it's affecting even, writers like Dave Broom, one of my favorite writers. He's one of the best. But like all the combo of slop plus just stuff getting generated, it affects what he can do. Cause it's like
Mhm.
if somebody needs an issue, they have want to discuss something about whiskey and they don't want to pay us, they'll run it through a machine and they kick out an
Yeah.
answer. And so we're stuck with, and this goes for the small brands, because I will get to the small brands. I use the music analogy. It's like when I was a kid, if you were a musician, you could make money as a recording artist. You would make money from record sales and CD sales and tape sales. Unless you're enormous, that's pretty much gone. If you're an artist now, you make money on the road. You
Mhm.
make money by you're going to play 200 dates a year.
Mhm.
You're going to out there,
Grinding
playing.
away.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's the one thing
Mm.
where you've cut out the middle person. It's like you
Mhm.
go to a venue, your fans come see you, you make new fans, you get paid.
Mhm.
In regards to, small brands, there's nothing that replaces pressing the flesh. Because the thing is, there's nobody, for the most part, for these brands, there's nobody you could outsource that to. Nobody could tell your story the way you tell your story. And, the people like to engage with the person who runs the brands, makes the spirit, whatever. That's what it is. And I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, you're running a distillery, you're working at a distillery, you're spending 45, 50 hours a week doing that. To
Mhm.
have to go and do an event for 3 hours is not the easiest thing to do. And I say that as a person who like, I have my day job, which is 40, 50 hours a week. And then I go do whiskey stuff and I go do
Yeah.
tastings. I go home and I write and I work on the podcast,
Yeah.
all of which is crazy. My friends are like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't actually know. I don't know how I do it.
You have a lot of energy, Kurt.
Apparently, but I'm getting older. So I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to have this energy. I have to do something
Well,
about
I
this.
think it's a use it or lose it situation. I think if you just don't stop, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think it's like, when the way you slept when you're in college, if you never
Uh-huh.
resorted to a normal schedule, you
Uh-huh.
can still like, get up early and go to bed late and you'll just keep
Yeah.
doing it. But
Uh,
I think for all these brands, it's like you need to make local partnerships and then expand that. Like,
mhm.
if you're state locked and you only have distribution in your state, you and or your staff need to know all the important bars in your state, the people who you can do events with. Because
Mhm.
events, it's like, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be, hey, you know what? Once a month we do a happy hour at this bar. We just go there and we're going to be there and we'll talk to you and we can test some of our new releases. We can bring you stuff that we haven't put out to market yet. You can basically do market research for free. You can do stuff like I remember suggesting to a brand and it worked for them. Pair up with a brand or you pair up with a bar, have the bar make cocktails with your spirit. have little note cards, have them, they can experiment, do whatever they want. And the bar can tell you which ones are selling the best, what
Hmm.
cocktails like the best. Post the top 3 cocktails or the top 10 on your website. And you can say, hey, you can get this here. This bar has this cocktail. Here's what they made. Here's how you make it at home. It's like that's the kind of interaction where like it works for the bar. You know, if you're legally allowed to give the bar a case of your booze, just let them make cocktails and see how it works, whether it's a highball or a Manhattan or whatever. And then you get the feedback from what's selling. You hear what from the bar, what people are saying. Like, what do they like? I really like this one. You can tell it's like, oh, well, you know what? I gave them 3 SKUs and one of them's really popular. Okay. You
Hmm.
know what? Now you know that maybe I push this one a little bit harder. Maybe I make these other ones limited releases. You kind of like, you get the data that you'd be paying somebody to give you by giving this stuff to the bars. And you build the relationship with the bar. If the bar is getting interesting things from you and people are coming to that bar to get whiskey or drink your whiskey, hey, you can go there. You could do like, like we met at the Stranahan's, their fest. You could do a mini fest. You can say,
Hmm.
hey, you know what, this month or this time in the summer, we're doing a barbecue out back and we're coming to this bar. Or maybe we're going to go to 3 different bars over the course of the month to celebrate the anniversary of our bar or
Hmm.
our distillery. And we're coming and we're going to bring some special stuff and we want you
Hmm.
to be there. It's like that kind of engagement gets you fans that people like you saw. Your Stranahan's people are lined up around the block to get a shot of getting this stuff. And
Yeah.
all brands can do it because it's something that's scalable. It's like if you do it in your city first,
Hmm.
up your county, you do your state. And it's not fast and it's that, but it's like if you build that following, it kind of lets you expand at a reasonable pace. You get the numbers and the data to see, okay, well, what's selling? How much should I make? It can affect your future. Like how much spirit do we need to make? Do we need to get another still? Like, that kind of stuff. And you can plan for, well, how are we doing in the other state? Like maybe there's a neighboring state we want to move into. And because I was telling this to Sekinder. I go, because he was talking about doing events here. I go, unfortunately, because Sekinder used to own the Whiskey Exchange. I go, there's no equivalent of the Whiskey Exchange here. There's no one marketplace where you can just have your stuff and you're like, I don't have to worry about getting it into the state. It's like, okay, I have a good, it's like Amazon. Like he was virtually Whiskey Exchange was the whiskey Amazon. I get my stuff on Amazon. Somebody wants it to click a button to get shipped to their house, no matter where they are. In New York, there's bottles that come out in Connecticut and Jersey. We get it later than they do. Not because the bottles don't exist.
Hmm.
They haven't put them out yet. They're planning something. They are fighting with somebody. They are want to hold it back to do something else. It's like all that stuff affects you purchasing. So I think as much as a brand can do to kind of generate the relationship with their potential customers or with their customers, that's great. And if you're also if your distillery has space to do events on site, it's also cool because
Hmm.
people rent it for weddings or graduations or anniversaries and they're there. And then you're part of their life. They're like, oh, I love this whiskey. I would love to, you and your spouse to be, love this place. Cool. We're going to do it there. And
Hmm.
it's not feasible everywhere, but like certainly if you're in a more rural environment where there's like a decent amount of acreage, you can do picnic tables and you can have barbecue pits and you can have maybe you have some like food trucks come and they do stuff or you can cater it. And it kind of gets them that you're just part of their life, and it
Hmm.
seems, either silly or over optimistic. But I'm like, if they like you that much, it's like a big deal when you're open and it's a big deal when you're closed and they care.
Yeah, and I mean, the benefit of that too is that, like, it's kind of that is a playing field where a small producer actually can sort of, like, compete effectively with larger
Right.
ones, right? Where, like, sure, Diageo can send a flotilla of, brand reps into your market and, like, do a bunch of events, but, like, if you actually live in your community and you're there all the time and,
Right.
you're actually able to build those relationships over time, I think that can be meaningful, especially when we're talking about maybe potentially reaching out to younger consumers or consumers who aren't already interested in spirits or
Right.
whiskey, where it's like that interpersonal relationship just becomes that much more important. It is interesting thinking too about, like, I don't know what to make of some of this. There's like all this online discourse, and a lot of it I'm just like getting it online and I don't know how real it is, but about like people in general and younger people specifically, like not going out as much, right? Like being less social in the real world, like going to bars less, going, interacting with their friends in real life less, this kind of like loneliness epidemic, isolation, and like that, whether or not that's real, and it may or may not be, offering these kinds of real life engagements is like feels more meaningful now than I think it maybe did before COVID. To circle back to kind of the
Right.
beginning of the conversation, right? Where like we all kind of went through this time where we were really lonely all the time. And now all of a sudden we can get together again. Let's find ways to do more of that and to, make that feel meaningful.
Well, I think the loneliness thing, because I mean, I've definitely seen some of it. My friends' kids, I notice it.
Hmm.
They were, as it was before they were ever of an age to drink, they were interacting with their friends online. They were basically like, even with the friends that were actual friends from high school or wherever, they'd be playing a game and talking to them with headphones on. They wouldn't be in the same room. Like when I played video games when I was a kid, it was like, oh, we were all in the same room on the
Yeah.
same crappy Atari or whatever, and we
Yeah.
would play and then we go to our respective homes. You
Yeah.
couldn't you couldn't play remote and you had to be there. And I
Hmm.
think on some level that's built, for certain kids or for certain youth, young adults, that's almost their default. It's like, okay, well, I can watch a movie and be on the phone, or I can have them on speaker and we can interact and watch the movie, but not be in the same place. I do think if you're doing stuff at a location, as long as one of these friends has any urge to go out, it might be they can kind of convince their cadre, like, hey, let's all go meet up. Because I'm definitely like among, let's say, older adults who were part of clubs, they liked a band or they liked a certain thing, or they liked chess or they liked a hobby. They
Whatever.
were
Yeah.
all they were all cool with doing the occasional meetup. Like, hey, let's
Hmm.
have it's like, it's fine we talk on phone, it's fine we're on the computer and we text each other. Hey, let's just go somewhere and meet up. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Let's just go. And I think if you can tap into that on some level, be the thing that make the glue or the thing that makes them go
Hmm.
somewhere or something they can enjoy when they get out. Now, how do you crack that group? Don't know. That might be above and beyond my pay grade and
Yeah.
skill set. But I do think it's like you encourage, because I mean, you think of it like if it's a bar, it's like a safe environment. Way better to have it in a reasonable size bar than some big festival, you
Mhm.
scale it. So it's like, okay, it's like, oh, I go to this bar and there's, let's say there's 20 people I always see there. And now there's 40 because they came for the event. Okay, well, that's cool. It's still like a space I'm familiar with. I'm used to eating the food here.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, it's a comfortable space to do these things versus we're going to like the equivalent of Whiskey Fest or some massive festival, and
Right.
you're walking around and you're like, well, you feel, because you're just buffeted by people running to and fro. It's like, no, no, let's make that event comfortable and fun, whether it's at the distillery or at a bar. But like,
Yeah.
that's the thing you can do. And you're right. It's like the big brands can't do that. They have money. They can definitely blanket it with ads. But keep
Totally.
in mind, you have people who aren't paying attention to ads necessarily. They're kind of blanking them
Mhm.
out. So it's the in person, which is the real, that's the secret sauce for a smaller brand. It's like you can do that one thing. You can appeal to community pride, city pride, state pride, all that. If your products are coming from the state, like, hey, let's bring the farmer that the grains came from, have them come. Let's do something at the farm. Let's do something with them. If they're willing, it's like, yeah, you can do that stuff and people eat that stuff up. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm. Well, this has been great. Any last thoughts or anything that occurred to you while we were chatting? I know we've been on this call for a little while.
I mean, it's the interesting thing, and it didn't occur to me from the conversation. This is something that's come up. It's like, so I refer back to the podcast, which I guess I should give it a name. It's called Decades Distilled. We cover decades. And so we covered the 70s and we're currently doing the 90s. The trick is the whiskey that you really enjoyed and that was underpriced in the 90s came from the 70s. If you don't have the whiskey lock of the 70s and 80s, brands would not be pushing that stuff out there so cheap and so much of it out there because they wouldn't have had it. So like all the whiskey that you didn't sell in the 80s, it got sold in the 90s and it got sold at a better price. So like, people who cry about, I used to get Pappy for so cheap. It's like, yeah, because they couldn't sell it. And then when they could, they just wanted it to go. They were so happy. And the advantage,
Mhm.
potentially, depending on how brands deal with today, is that whoever's drinking in 8 years, 9 years. They're going to be drinking some great stuff. They'll be drinking some overage stuff that didn't go on the market. The brands either held it back, and they can do new SKUs. Even if you're, I mean, it's hard because it's, do you have the money to hold stuff back? Can you afford to, pay to keep this stuff? But overall, for the survivors, for the drinkers, it'll be great for them because there'll be so much new stuff on the market. There'll be new age SKUs, for the smaller like local distilleries. They'll be able to put out that 8-year-old or that 10-year-old, and it won't be they'll put out tons of it because they'll reduce production, but it'll be there. And
Mhm.
I think that the future of what you're going to drink is looking very bright. You just have to get to that future. That's the issue, you know? So I think that's what I think of now, because I've changed how I buy booze. Like even I buy less than I used to. And not that I don't love whiskey. It's like, that's the funny thing. People are like, people don't love whiskey more. No, I love whiskey. I drink it all the
Mhm.
time, but it's changed from where I was. And maybe I'm more selective as to what I'm buying. I'm pickier now. And I only want certain things. That's just me. But it's not only me, it's everybody else. Everybody else has
Mhm.
kind of changed their buying habits based on the circumstances they're in. So if new stuff comes out and is really tasty and at a good price point, I think it'll have sales, commensurate with that. But I don't see like the flashy, sexy, big bottles selling in huge numbers. They need to be limited releases. Like, oh, there are only 100 bottles and maybe you'll sell 40 of them and the other 60 will sit somewhere and molder and someone will pick them up later.
I can't wait for Decades Distilled 2020s. Are you already sort of like,
Yeah, it's
imagining
funny
how
because we
that
have to
will
go through
go?
like, yeah, because the thing is we refuse to do stuff in order and we got 5 years before this decade's done. It might be like we
Yeah,
have to do it the second the decade's done if
4
Sarah doesn't
years.
kill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's 4 years. Because I mean, we haven't covered the 2000s yet. Like we're doing the 90s.
Mm,
We're
mhm.
currently recording the 1940s.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's me being an ass and like I don't want to do one year after another. The rationale being that if I do it in order, or if we do it in order, then you could read it. Whereas if we mix it up, you get little hints of things like
Mhm,
stuff we learn in the 1880s. They come to fruition in 1970s.
mhm,
The stuff we're learning in the 1940s that I didn't think about, like why is Canadian whiskey so dominant from the post-war into like, let's say the 80s? It's like, oh,
mm,
well, here, I'll give you a hint. It's like US production was unstable from prohibition into the war because,
mhm,
Americans don't think of it this way, but like, okay, you have prohibition. So almost nobody's making whiskey. You have Great Depression. Nobody has money. You have the war. Every distillery gets turned to industrial alcohol to make things for the war. There's no normal bourbon production or whiskey production in the States until after like 46. So, but Canada never stopped making whiskey. They did
mm,
do industrial whiskey, but they always had whiskey. So the moment the troops come back, there's Canadian whiskey on the shelves. And, it takes time for the Americans to ramp up. So the Canadians kind of like, they were there right after Prohibition. They were there during the war. They were there after the war.
yeah,
And their style was one that like people liked. It was pleasant, it was easy to get. And they'd done a good job of having businesses on both sides of the border, MGP. They had plants and distilleries in Kentucky. They had plants and distilleries in Maryland. Plus they had their Canadian assets. It was like, okay, that worked out really well until it didn't. But that's stuff I wouldn't have known until I started reading about it. Because it's just like, I just remember as a kid seeing Canadian whiskey everywhere. And then kind of that backed off as I got older,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. So interesting. Yeah, and then a whole generation kind of developed that taste, right? And so then
Mhm.
they were. Okay, thank you so much, Kurt. This was a delight to talk to you as always.